Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get things kicked off. And I know first item on the agenda we'll deal with is the Immigrant Refugee Tap Water Initiative. And Jen, you want to get us started and introduce your guests as well?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, pull that up kind of close because people are watching and this is being
How's that
recorded.
sound?
So, yeah.
Is that all right? Okay. Okay, thank you. So I'm Jennifer Terry, and thank you for your time today. I'm here to talk about the Immigrant Refugee Tap Water Outreach Project. My co-presenters today are Melissa Walker with Des Moines Waterworks, and I'll let her tell a little bit more about herself when she presents. And also Dr. Samantha Zuhlke from the University of Iowa, who's presenting remotely today. So I just would give a couple of remarks as an introduction before Dr. Zuhlke and Melissa take over. But in 2022, when I was an employee of Des Moines Waterworks, I became intrigued and irritated by advertising, Ted Corrigan probably remembers, by some of the advertising from bottled water companies that seemed to try and indicate that tap water is unsafe or dirty in some way. And so I thought, who are these people targeting and why are they targeting them? And so those questions ignited a partnership between Des Moines Waterworks and University of Iowa researchers and the county. So as a result of some research done by the University of Iowa, we have learned that low-income immigrant and refugee residents are targeted for marketing campaigns by bottled water companies. And so Des Moines Waterworks funded the first research study to understand more about behaviors and opinions among the targeted populations. And then the county last year funded a second sort of phase to put a bit of a finer point on the research and also to make recommendations of what we can do collectively as a community to solve these problems. So I would just end my remarks by saying, why is this important to the county? Well, first of all, bottled water is largely unregulated, and of course Des Moines Waterworks can speak more to that, but it's a public health issue. And of course, it's an economic burden to households. So when immigrants, refugees, and low-income residents are trying to set up households and have strapped incomes anyway, this is possibly an unnecessary expenditure of household funds. So our goal of this project, which is coming along really well, thanks to Mock Sucheska and some of our partners around the county and around the city, we're coming up with an outreach campaign based upon the science. So of course, low-income residents, immigrants, and refugees are autonomous. They can, behave however they wish, but we want them to be sure that they have reliable science-based information about tap water. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Zuhlke.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And I know you have printouts of the slides, but do you see my screen share currently?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you today. We have student final exams, and I think this is probably a more fun part of my day. So I'm really excited to share results from a project we worked on with Polk County with you all today. I'm going to keep my remarks pretty high level here, but if you have questions, I'm happy to dig into the details. As Jen said, my name is Samantha Zuhlke, and I'm an assistant professor in the School of Planning and Public Affairs here at the University of Iowa. So my expertise is in drinking water, particularly around the choices people make when they choose to either drink commercial water products like bottled water or water sold from kiosks, as well as sort of how those choices tell us something about people's relationship with government. So I co-authored a book called The Profits of Distrust, and that came out right around the same time Jen mentioned the Des Moines Waterworks had questions about why do people spend so much money on bottled water? And kind of this collaboration between the two of us has led to funding from the National Science Foundation, funding from the University of Iowa's Environmental Health Sciences Research Center, and a really solid partnership with the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination, which is funded by the state and is here on the University of Iowa's campus. So I'm going to begin my remarks today by sharing just a little bit of information about why should governments care about tap water. Now, there's the obvious, right? Most tap water in the U.S. is produced by local governments, and so we should care about the services we provide to our constituents. But as Jen mentioned, there's an economic aspect to people's drinking water choices. So this figure shows the growth of the bottled water industry in the United States over the past couple of decades. In 2020, Americans spent $40 billion on bottled water. This year, Americans will spend nearly $50 billion on bottled water. For a sense of scale, that's nearly half of the utility revenue for drinking water across the entire U.S. And if you break down the math, that's about $25 per household per month in the country. So the question is, why do people spend so much money on bottled water when most Americans have a cheaper, more regulated, less environmentally destructive alternative like tap water? Now, in my work, what we argue is that one of the reasons that drives this purchasing is trust in government. So as bottled water purchasing in the United States has increased, trust in government has decreased. And we essentially spend the whole book tying these things together. So this figure shows that people who trust local, state, and federal government are more likely to drink tap water. Conversely, people who say that they never trust local, state, or federal government are more likely to rely on bottled water as a primary drinking water source. And we think one of the things driving this relationship is marketing from commercial water companies. So you might have seen signs like this around Polk County. The knock on tap water by this commercial water company is pretty obvious. It says that your tap water can hang out in some pretty seedy joints. The idea here is that a lot of commercial water companies sort of share information about tap water that's not necessarily true in their marketing campaigns. What's more concerning is that these marketing campaigns often target low-income and non-white individuals. So in the United States, Black, Hispanic, and low-income individuals are more likely to rely on bottled water as a primary drinking water source, even when they have safe tap water to drink. And these groups often have fewer resources within their family structures, and so what ends up happening is you have groups with the fewest resources spending the most on commercial water. Now, why does this matter to governments, right? It matters for a couple reasons. So first off, we see this exit to the commercial sector reflected in how people interact with government. So Black, Hispanic, and low-income individuals are less likely than white individuals to contact government when they experience a problem with their tap water. It's not just participation that relates to water, though. In general, we find that bottled water drinkers are less likely than tap water drinkers to participate in a lot of aspects of civic life. So bottled water drinkers are less likely to attend local meetings, participate in political campaigns, contact public officials, or donate to political campaigns or causes than tap water drinkers are. And perhaps unsurprisingly, bottled water drinkers are also less likely to support infrastructure investments within their communities. So bottled water drinkers are less willing to pay rate increases to pay for water and wastewater services. So earlier work we did in Des Moines suggests that these patterns are also present here. So back in 2023, Des Moines Waterworks and us partnered to do some initial focus group interviews where we learned that white affluent individuals were much more likely to drink tap water because they trust the Des Moines Waterworks, whereas Black, Hispanic, and low-income individuals we spoke with were much more likely to drink bottled water and had a lot more questions and concerns about the safety and quality of their tap water being provided. And this is a concerning pattern because in general, these groups, especially within Des Moines, receive consistent tap water service from the same provider. So in Polk County, you have a couple different tap water providers, but the largest by far is the Des Moines Waterworks. And they have a really strong record of providing safe drinking water, safe tap water to their clients. Now, this sort of brings me to the project that we worked on this summer with Polk County because, You know, one of the groups we talked to in that initial interview was a group of refugee and immigrants. And what we learned through those conversations is that the needs of these groups might be slightly unique compared to everybody else. And this is obviously a concern for Polk County, kind of given the changing demographics in your area. And so we partnered with Polk County in part because of the opportunity presented by the new Welcome Center to see if there was a way we could address some of those needs as they relate to drinking water, and then on a broader scale as they sort of help integrate folks into a new governmental system. So the questions we asked this summer are, what is the source of distrust in tap water within refugee and immigrant groups? How does the source of this distrust vary between refugee and immigrant groups, for example, if people are coming from different countries? And then what are key avenues of communication to and within refugee and immigrant groups? In other words, we wanted to figure out ways to capitalize upon existing networks within these communities in order to reduce any possible costs of a project like this. And so this past summer, we interviewed 22 people from 6 different countries and 4 languages via both focus group interviews and individual interviews. Most of the interviews took place in Des Moines, Iowa, and we compensated everybody for their time. Now, 59% of the people that we spoke to had been in the United States for less than a year. And then 100% of people that we spoke to were, their country of origin was different from that of the United States. So here's what we learned, right? Again, I'm going to keep this high level, but if you have questions, I'm happy to dig into details. So of the 22 people we interviewed, 21 people primarily drank bottled water. And a lot of the reasoning behind this was hedged in a belief that bottled water is cleaner or safer than tap water. A lot of people attributed this to aesthetics in tap water, so how it tastes, aesthetics of bottled water, like the feel of the water, how it tasted, how it smelled, but also this belief that bottled water was cleaner and healthier than tap water, in part because they could see labels on bottled water, and also because there was so much more information about bottled water than there was about tap water. So for instance, if you walk into a grocery store, you're bombarded with marketing from commercial water companies about how superior commercial water is to tap water, whereas you only hear about tap water if there's a problem, if you hear about it at all. A lot of other people, not a lot, but some people did experience some tap water problems in the temporary housing that they were in, which again is kind of your first experience in the United States, and so that can change how you feel about a particular product. And so people receive bottled water largely through purchasing at supermarkets or Walmart, and they spend a significant amount of income on their water bills. Now, they also spend a significant amount of income on bottled water, but a lot of this purchasing was discussed as a trade-off. Because people are unsure about the quality of tap water, to them it was worth it to purchase bottled water, even though it's more expensive, because it would defray future healthcare costs. And so there was a lot that we heard that suggested people were interested in drinking tap water, but they really needed more information about it before they could make an informed decision. And so if we go back to those 3 questions, when we talk about where this distrust of tap water in refugee and immigrant groups comes from, what we heard in our focus group interviews is that tap water aesthetics send a strong message to people about sort of the safety of their water, and in the absence of information, people link those aesthetics to health concerns. There's a significant lack of information about tap water as it compares to commercial water. We heard some about people's prior water experiences, for example, in refugee camps or in their home countries, hearing about their experiences with water. But one thing that surprised me is we actually heard much more positive experiences with drinking tap water equivalents in those contexts than I anticipated we would hear. So a lot of people did drink the equivalent of tap water back home, but they had an understanding of where that water came from and how it was produced that they lack in the United States. And so in the U.S., that information gap seems to be filled by bottled water companies, both in terms of its marketing and its labeling. The biggest sort of variance we saw between our interviewees was really dealt with length of time in the United States. We didn't see a whole lot of differences between areas of the world that people came from. And then finally, when we think about communication with these groups, we heard a lot about the importance of personal opinion, knowledge, and observations. People rely on kind of what they see being in a new context. We also heard a lot about the importance of case managers as your go-to information source for so many things. But oftentimes, case managers don't have the time or bandwidth to address tap water. And even if they do, there was some hesitancy because case managers are seen as experts in lots of fields, but not necessarily drinking water. And so people really wanted to hear from government or public health agencies about tap water quality and safety. So when we think about all of this together, we need to be cognizant of how we're messaging with these groups. We want to avoid top-down passive language that's just telling people water's safe. We really want to be meeting them where they are to hear what their concerns are so we can address them directly. And so our report produced some recommendations. You have them on your slides printed out. I'll just highlight a couple. So in the short term, there's a lot of easy things that can be done. Continuing to work with partners in this space. Polk County has great organizations working with these groups, and so leveraging those partnerships to reach clients is really important. Simple things like ensuring that resources about tap water are provided in multiple languages is an easy way to address some of the information barriers. And then a big thing is that making sure that tap water is sort of present in people's lives. So for example, we conducted one interview following a cultural orientation class where everyone was provided with bottled water to drink. And while that's a lovely gesture and service, it does send a message about this is the water you drink compared to, oh, you don't drink tap water. And so making sure that tap water is kind of a part of the orientation process is important. Longer term, there are certainly more things to address this sort of pattern and correct it if you'd like to do. For example, addressing the role of housing agents, landlords, and hotel workers at an individual and structural level is really important. When we think about who folks are interacting with, case managers, landlords, again, hotel employees in temporary housing, it's really important to think about how people access water in sort of their orientation to the United States and building up infrastructure and pathways for sharing information with them. And then finally, I think Melissa will talk about some of these, but again, just building more avenues of sharing information with people that there's a demand for. And so how do we get that information to these people in a way that's accessible? So again, if there's time for questions, I'm happy to go into more details, but at this time I will hand things over to Melissa from the Des Moines Water Works.
Well, while Sarah gets that up, I'll introduce myself. Good morning. I'm Melissa Walker. I'm the Communications and Outreach Manager at Des Moines Waterworks. Appreciate you having me here today to talk to you about this project. We're really excited about it. This project has been developed in conjunction with Polk County, including your Global Neighbors Welcome Center, as a result of the research from the University of Iowa. And initially, we're calling this campaign Water for All, and each of you received a page there at your chair, so you can read a little bit more about that. But at its core, it's a multi-pronged approach, an educational and outreach campaign to ensure that our immigrant and refugee communities have reliable information about tap water. And then with that information, they can make the decisions and the choices that they believe are best for themselves and their families. Dr. Zuhlke shared with you the information related to the why behind this. She dived into the research that she and her team have performed. But for Des Moines Waterworks, we want to better serve our community. Anecdotally, we had seen and heard that members of our refugee and immigrant communities were drinking more bottled water than tap water, and we really wanted to understand why, which, as Jen shared with you, led to that initial relationship with the university. And then we joined with Polk County as the county identified bottled water consumption among our immigrant and refugee community as an urgent economic issue. Dr. Zuhlke walked you through the research that her team has performed, but in addition to that, we've begun having quite a few one-on-one and small group conversations with groups that work specifically with or are immigrants or refugees themselves to better understand their concerns as well as how do they want to be reached out to. From the research, we have a multitude of recommendations. Dr. Zuhlke touched on a few of those, but I wanted to address a couple of the findings that we're very interested in sharing information about. First and foremost, folks want reassurance of the cleanliness and the standard of drinking water. And so we're going to walk them through that. We're going to explain how we meet or exceed expectations every day at the federal and state level for tap water, while bottled water is less regulated. They want to know more about who Des Moines Waterworks is. What is a waterworks? What does it mean to be a drinking water utility? What is our role? What is our responsibility? Why do we care? So we're going to invite them in to our doors. We're also going out into the community to introduce our experts, both those working in our laboratory and those involved in treatment. They want to know more about aesthetics, which you heard about. So we're going to address some of those things related to taste, odor, bubbles in water, calcium buildup on faucets, those sorts of things. Answer their questions and explain why those things happen. They also want to understand, where does water come from? We heard and we learned that in their home countries, oftentimes they knew or they could see where the water came from. So we're going to introduce them to that treatment concept, showing them where the water starts in the raw form in the river, walking them through each step of treatment, explaining what happens, and then showing how that becomes the clean, finished drinking water they can rely upon at their tap. So our next steps, as you know, we have a multitude of recommendations, but first and foremost, we've been doing a lot of the legwork, a lot of the background work, but next week, I believe you will be approving the hiring of a marketing firm. That firm is going to be developing culturally appropriate, science-based outreach materials that will be available in a variety of languages. The languages are listed right there, but to start with, we're starting with Arabic, Dari, Swahili, Burmese, French, and Spanish. Last year, Des Moines Waterworks began expanding our outreach footprint out into the community with more events and hosting more tours within our facilities. We're going to continue to grow that. We're going to follow some of the recommendations that were in the report as far as specific places to go, the LSI Global Greens Market being one of those. And then as we go to those events, ensuring that we have bilingual staff as well as those materials available in all languages for folks to learn about tap water. One of the things we're really excited about is the one-day academy that we're hosting at Des Moines Waterworks. We're partnering with a variety of folks who do work with the immigrant and refugee communities, or, like I said, are immigrants or refugees themselves. We're inviting them to this academy so that then they can become an ambassador or an influencer of trust, then to share information amongst their group. We'll go through the treatment process. We'll introduce them to our employees, address some of those aesthetic and safety concerns that they have, and doing that in a way that they want to hear from folks. And so we're bringing in some individuals from the medical community, as well as the University of Iowa researchers, to be involved in that academy. And then finally, we're going to be partnering with Mark Sucheska and his team at Global Neighbors to install a bottle filling station, provide some reusable water bottles, and create a tap water information center for anyone coming to that location. And then finally, I would just share that we have multiple members of our team here today. We have our CEO, Ted Corrigan, our CFO, Amy Kaler, our Director of Customer Service and Marketing, Laura Sarcone, and then some representatives from Central Iowa Waterworks as well, including the new Executive Director, Tammy Madsen. They're all seated here in the audience. And with that, we thank you for your time and attention and answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions for the board?
Sarah asked if I could talk a little bit about the funding for the project. So the initial budget was $150,000 that was approved last year or the year before by the board. So out of that 150,000, we have so far spent about 40,000 associated with research. We're going to put an agreement before you next week for your approval to hire a marketing firm who has a sister company that does this very work. They're used to working with immigrant and refugee communities and doing translation services. So you'll see that next week, and then the remainder of the budget this year will be spent on the activities that Melissa outlined. So that will be materials and so on for the academy, and also for the materials, outreach, kiosk and things at the Global Neighbors Center. So this project will likely wrap up at the end of this year for this budget right now. Now, if the county decides to continue in a partnership with Waterworks, I'm sure that would be awesome and everybody would appreciate it, but that would be up to the board. Yeah, ARPA funding, right.
Thank you. Great presentation.
I have one quick question, and Jen, you can decide who should take this, whether it be the doctor from University of Iowa or Waterworks, but one of the questions that I often get at neighborhood meetings is questions about the prevalence of cancer rates rising in the, particularly around the upper respiratory issues that we're seeing in Iowa that's far outpacing the rest of the nation, and the tie to drinking water. Was that an issue that was raised in any of your focus groups by any of the populations that were interviewed?
That's not something that I'm qualified to answer today, but I would imagine Dr. Zuhlke may, or Melissa, if you want to jump in as well.
I can jump in, and then Melissa, feel free to add anything. In our focus group interviews that we conducted this summer, the word cancer was, to my recollection, not specifically mentioned. So that is probably just reflective of the population, right? Because so many people that we spoke to had only been in the U.S. for less than a year, some as early as 2 months. But what we did hear were a lot of general health concerns. Kidneys were mentioned in particular. Basically, there was a lot of the concern around tap water consumption was linked to, I would say, broad health concerns. And so that certainly is, I think that it's fair to say that that concern is present. I'm not sure we heard about the cancer concern specifically.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for your time.
Okay, at this time, we're going to go ahead and move on the issue of the Hilton soft renovation, and we're going to hear from Tim Oswald and Wayne Reames, talk a little bit about that along with Sarah. I don't know who's kicking off today, but
Oh, you want to sit up at the front? Or?
that's fine, and you can just share the microphone. Pull it close to you, because it's hard to hear otherwise.
I'm hobbling on a broken foot. So,
Okay.
So I appreciate the seat.
Okay.
So I think what, certainly we're here to give you guys whatever information you need. Subject to what you want to do differently, we thought maybe we'd take this as kind of words and music. I'm Wayne Reames. I'm the attorney for IEC Hotel Corporation. I could talk a little bit about the history of the hotel, what was done, how it was done. It was a complex structure. And then we could move to Tim with some of the numbers, if you guys think that's appropriate.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm a partner at the Belin McCormick law firm by training. I'm a CPA and a tax attorney. I've been there since about 2000. And one of the things that I do a lot of is I work with institutional nonprofits. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story, and the further back in time it goes is more my understanding, not anything that we would have been directly a part of. But as you know, in about 2003, Polk County decided that they wanted to rehabilitate the barn, build what ended up being Wells Fargo Arena, and have a convention center complex in Des Moines. And my understanding is, going back from the beginning, there was an intentionality and an enthusiasm for having a convention center hotel attached to that, with the idea being that you could get better events and more tourism, et cetera, et cetera. And even though certainly we have a very good hotel a large hotel in the Marriott, not too far away from that location, the idea of having something actually physically attached to it is, in my understanding, very attractive for conventioneers, et cetera, et cetera. They kind of like one-stop shopping. Ultimately, that project went forward, and the hotel aspect was deferred, and it was not taken up. Polk County ended up building those things, ended up owning them directly, and as you know, as it relates to Wells Fargo Arena, they have a manager that manages that property for them. Okay. So move forward, and over the ensuing 10 years, give or take, there were a number of initiatives to say, okay, the Wells Fargo Arena is doing good, we're making money, but we still could have more conventions, there's still more we could do. Can we get the hotel off the ground? And my understanding is that, on more than one occasion, they tried to take that out to market, with seeing if anyone privately was interested in doing that. And that did not happen. Then the next flashpoint was, and Tim can talk about this when he talks about the numbers, but when the statute for the IRA was passed, that created a new potential source of funding that could go in a capital stack that could be used for a hotel. And so now we're talking, give or take 2012, 2013. And Polk County went back out and said, okay, well, can we build something? Okay, and my understanding is at that time, there was not, the only enthusiasm for building it privately would have involved the infusion of quite a bit of public money to get it done. And so at that point, Polk County decided, well, rather than paying someone else to own the hotel, why don't we do it internally? Okay. A secondary decision was made, and this was before I got on, and you'll hear why in a second, but a decision was made that rather than directly own it, like Wells Fargo Arena is owned, they were interested in a model where there would be a nonprofit corporation that was formed for the benefit of Polk County, but it would be the direct title holder of the hotel. And that's about the time when I came into the room, because now they're doing nonprofit stuff and they need somebody who knows things about setting up nonprofits. Okay, so ultimately then what happened was, and this goes to another related point, in order to make it happen, Polk County first had to cobble together the pieces of real estate that was near the convention center somehow in order to be able to build this thing, okay? And Polk County utilized what was then a new other nonprofit organization that was set up by community leaders called Des Moines Redevelopment Company. And Des Moines Redevelopment Company, and I think you probably all know about them, that is an entity that is a standalone entity that helps to facilitate the city and the county to put things together and make things happen. And so one of the projects was dealing with the downtown YMCA and the Polk County Plex building. And so DMRC has done a number of things. I should say I represent DMRC too. That's probably not a coincidence. But starting at about 2012, DMRC was formed and started trying to put together deals to get the parcels together for Polk County. Ultimately, They had two combined parcels, one where the hotel currently sits, and the other on the other side of the street. There's a, American Republic owns the insurance building, but on the other side of the street is now a parking lot that the hotel uses. So those are kind of the two big parcels associated with the hotel. And in 2014, DMRC, who had acquired them, transferred them directly to Polk County. So important point number one, Polk County owns the land that the hotel was built on and also owns the parking lot across the street that the hotel uses. Okay. So Polk County wanted a separate nonprofit owning the hotel building, okay, but also wanted to finance this in part with tax-exempt bonds, okay? So there's a needle you got to thread there, okay? And in order for the IRS to allow tax-exempt bonds issued on behalf of Polk County to be issued by an entity, in our case, IEC Hotel Corporation, that entity has to have some very specific provisions in it. And the primary three are, number one, Polk, in order for IEC to issue bonds on behalf of Polk County, number one, Polk County has to control that entity, okay? And it does that by the bylaws of the entity, create 7 seats on the board. 5 of those seats are appointed by and serve at the pleasure of Polk County, and the other 2 seats are appointed by the city. But when the city makes those appointments, Polk County has to say, yeah, we're okay with those people. Okay, so it's kind of like the Senate, has to confirm them, but then they're in. Okay, so number one, Polk County controls the entity. During the term of IEC Hotel Corporation, the sole beneficiary, okay, the sole, if you will, charitable beneficiary, because it is a 501c3, is Polk County, okay, and it exists to own the hotel on behalf of Polk County, and all the benefits inure to Polk County. Upon dissolution of IEC Hotel Corporation, all the assets of the entity have to go to Polk County, all right? That's under the bylaws. Under the rules for the IRS for doing on behalf of bonds, there's a weird requirement that we can issue bonds on behalf of Polk County, okay? But when those bonds hit final maturity and are paid off, then the assets purchased with the bonds must be distributed to the government. Okay, so the structure as this is, and again, Tim can talk more about the numbers, but 40 years from now, okay, at some point in the future, when the thing is paid off, the hotel has to go back to Polk County, okay? Polk County can do what it wants at that point with it, but that's a requirement of the entity, okay? The third requirement of being on behalf of issuer is we cannot partner with anyone and have any of the equity benefit of the hotel inured to anyone other than Polk County. And what that means is, in order to build a hotel and flag it, and then deal with a Hilton or a Marriott or whoever we choose, in our case Hilton, their management agreement has to be what's called a qualifying management agreement that limits their profit based on the profit of the hotel, right? So they are a service provider. They provide management services, they get paid, and again, all the profit goes to Polk County. So the last thing I'll say there is, again, 2014, the land went to Polk County. IEC Hotel Corporation was created, and then through a series of, and I can get into whatever boring detail you want, but through a series of steps, the hotel was created where the owner of the hotel, sitting on a ground lease from Polk County, is IEC Hotel Corporation, but it's all through a structure where the bondholder trustee, which started out as Bankers Trust Company, now is UMB Bank, okay, manages that all to make sure that the bonds are paid for, et cetera, et cetera. So we have, so in terms of the pieces here, Polk County owns the land, IEC owns the hotel, there's a management agreement with Hilton, IEC contracts with a property manager, CHM Warnick, which is basically our representative vis-a-vis Hilton, okay? We have a board, okay? And then there's the bond trustee that moves all the money around and makes the payments happen. So let me stop there. I know that was a lot, but that's kind of how we got it up and running, and it ultimately opened in 2018. So are we good? Are we good so far? Okay,
So far.
I'll turn it over to Tim and he can talk about some of the numbers.
And I think you have this, I see it on the screen now. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of context on the dollars that were spent in 2018 and how they were funded. The acquisition of the hotel, so White's built the project. White's owned it during the construction period. And once it was completed and Hilton had flagged the hotel, it was acquired by IEC, $102 million for that. There were some county costs that county had paid during the planning phases, so the county was reimbursed for those out-of-pocket costs. Financing, closing expenses, legal, all that stuff got paid, $2.6 million. Working capital and operating capital, $2.5 million. So the agreement with Hilton is that there's a certain amount of dollars left that was contributed up front, $495,000, and that those dollars sit in the fund and they use them to pay for the day-to-day transactional items as they have cash flow. There's also the rest of the agreement with Hilton is that $2 million was put into an operating reserve that they can draw on at any time to cover operating expenses. But it sits in the reserve otherwise. And so that reserve is full. The operating capital is full. So that $2.5 million is still sitting there in the various accounts right now. There were also financing reserves for the various, I call them bond, they were lease certificates, but for the various bonds sold, $5.5 million of various reserves. Those reserves all exist today, except there was one reserve of $400,000 that went to one of the bonds. That bond has been paid off, and that reserve was extinguished as part of the payoff. So the reserves otherwise exist as in full, haven't been touched.
What was the value of the bond that was paid off?
Yeah, so that was it was $4 million loan, and that was paid from the Iowa Reinvestment Act, the sales tax TIF, and it was the business community investment component, and that loan was actually issued by the city of Des Moines. Doing okay? So all told, $113.5 million cost structure. How it was funded, $30 million so mostly bank loans. I should start there. We didn't sell public bond debt like the county usually sells public debt. Everything was arranged as a bank loan. $30 million and $10 million Series A and A1 and A2. Those are secured by just hotel net operating income. 27.75 million also secured by hotel income. The county is the lender. You own that bond today. 27.75. There were two 7.5-ish million total, two small loans that are paid from what we call a facility fee, and it's a 3% charge on the room nights that Hilton collects from its patrons, turns over to the trustee every month. Then the IRA, there were 3 series there. The business series we just talked about at $4 million. 2 other series. One is secured by a guarantee of the city. The other is secured by a guarantee of the county. 8.5 and 7.8 million respectively of those. Hilton contributed 3 million up front in what's called key money. There was a brownfield grant, and then the city contributed 14.2 million through TIF. All told, 13.5 million. Of the 113.5 million, 99.3 million of that was debt, the balance being the city's contribution or the various grants. Doing okay? Okay. So then the little chart, and I apologize for my small, it's a little hard to read, but the chart, so time has passed. The IEC's been making payments on the debts, and the outstanding debt at this time totals, and it's in between those two little yellow bars, totals 68.8 million at the end of FY25. So I'm presuming that the payments that are due in 2 months will be made. Doing okay? So, and that's net of the various reserves. So that's the net amount of debt outstanding. And out of that 68, Polk County is the largest creditor at 25.9 million. So you own the majority, well, slightly under half, but the largest single component. You have provided cash to, each time the $27 million loan, you received a principal or interest payment on that loan. Since 2018, you have taken those dollars and given them back to IEC, and they've used those dollars to prepay the $10 million loan from the bank. That $10 million loan was exhausted in January of this year. It's been paid off. It does not exist. And so you've contributed towards your payments that are due to you. You've turned around and put back in to the transaction and paid debt down. And I calculate that that was about 8.4 million of contribution that you've made since 2018 towards retiring that debt.
How much did that save the county by retiring that debt, or?
I can do that calc. I'm sorry, I didn't remember to do that. So. Doing okay?
Yep.
Okay, so the next page is not intended to be intimidating, though I respect that it's probably overwhelming for many. The Hilton Management Agreement has a flow chart. We call it a waterfall, and there's a lot of steps in it. There are 12 total steps, but most of the action happens in the first 4. And so if a guest stays at the Hilton and they pay their bill, Hilton keeps the dollars that they need to cover the operating costs, pay their staff, buy the supplies, et cetera. And then what's left at the end of the month gets sent to the trustee, whatever that number is, gets sent to the trustee. And then from there, the trustee has to follow this waterfall to step through where do the dollars go. So I'm not going to bore you with every little step in here, but the key steps are, number 1, the trustee peels off, and it's about $300,000 a year to cover the county's admin costs. So you pay CHM Warnick, you pay the accountant, you pay us a little bit. So those are costs that need to get paid, and so those get paid. That's first dollars in each month. Second step along the waterfall is money goes into the debt service fund, and that would be to cover the Series A and the Series B loans. So the loan that the county made is Series B, the loan that the bank made is Series A. So those two, and that cash is 100% of what comes in until such time as there's enough cash in the fund to cover debt payments for the year. Doing okay? So then once that happens, the next step would be to replenish any balances that were in deficit in the reserve I'm sorry, in the debt service fund. And then you move into the next step is cash goes into the FF&E fund. The agreement with Hilton is that IEC will set aside 4% of its room revenues each year into the FF&E fund, and the funds are spent on purchasing equipment or remodeling, as the topic of the day is. But if there's cash available, it goes in the fund. If there's not cash available, the fund just sits unfunded, which is where we sit today. That's a little misleading. I didn't mean to say it quite that way. There is cash in the fund. It's not fully funded. It is partially funded.
And that's from the 4% of room sales?
Exactly.
So what does that mean, partially funded?
So in the waterfall, cash comes in the top. We peel out debt service and operating costs, and whatever's left drops into the FF&E account. What's dropped in is less than what the 4% calculation would have produced.
How much less?
It's a couple million since 2018. I can get you the exact number, but we're less a little bit there. The FF&E fund, once there's cash in that fund, is to be spent to maintain and protect the hotel, the physical asset.
Right.
Right? So, and much of the dollars that have been spent to this point have been on, I consider, minor equipment repairs and replacements, buying a new chiller for a freezer or something like that. Hasn't been a lot of expensive items, but a lot of, $10,000 to $20,000 type purchases so far. Hilton does not have control over that fund. It has to go to the IEC board for approval before an expenditure can be made. So the IEC board ultimately controls that decision. Doing okay? You sure? Any questions so far?
No, I think I'm following you.
So then from there, you move into the rest of the steps are kind of what happens if this didn't get funded, what happens if that didn't get funded, we replenish, how do we replenish, et cetera. And step number 7 there is somewhat important only insofar as, the agreement with Hilton is they get paid a management fee, and if there's cash available, they get paid an additional fee, which we subordinated to FF&E and to debt service. So they get a subordinate management fee if there's cash available in that fund, which is why there's all this kind of goofiness in between. Because Hilton would like to earn their subordinate fee. And you would like to make sure that in them earning the fee, it's not coming at the county's expense from some other source. So that's why it sits where it sits, and there's kind of some back and forth of if this, then this in the steps above it. Hilton has not earned the subordinate fee to this point since the hotel opened, and I don't currently anticipate them earning it this year. Doing okay?
Just one question.
Shoot.
Is the Oakview Group engaged in any of this financing at all?
Yeah, good question. No. No is a simple answer.
The reason I ask, I know the strategy back when the decision was made was that we were missing out on multi-day conventions based on the lack of a headquarters hotel. And so all we would get is the one-day deal, so nobody was spending any time in the hotels or downtown entertainment district, which is what we were trying to accomplish.
Yep.
So it never was to reach its full potential.
Yep. So, and Wayne kind of alluded to that in his comments. So one of the things the board did way back when is commissioned a study from a firm called JLL. And that report was an economic analysis of how Wells Fargo, or I think I need to call it Casey's.
Not yet.
Not
Oh, okay.
until July.
Okay, so how the Wells Fargo complex would be affected by the presence of the hotel or the absence of it. And my recollection of that study is that they concluded that there was about $1.5 million a year revenues that would accrue to IEC because of to the Iowa Events Center because of the presence of the hotel. Now, we've never updated that discussion for, bring that forward from 10 years ago to today to see if how true that is. Might be an interesting question at some point, but I don't want to be accused of spending your money, so. Doing okay?
I would just say that we do, the IEC Hotel Board does meet regularly, not monthly, but whatever, 6 times a year, 5 times a year. And as part of that, there's always a presentation from Warnick on, which they preload in from information from Hilton. How are we doing? How are we doing on rooms? How are rooms booking going out? What are we doing in terms of conventions, et cetera, et cetera. And I have been at most of those meetings, and while, again, I don't have numbers, I think it is generally understood and agreed that the convention center and Des Moines has been able to get several larger multi-day events that otherwise just, they had not been into running. We've had several presentations from people at the hotel on the marketing side and talking about how this group or that group, Des Moines was never met their criteria before, but now with the hotel they can do that. And what we're finding too is that when people come in, not only do they stay and they increase the revenues at the Hilton, but that also has a spillover effect and tends to fill up the Marriott, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anecdotally, I think it is true that major aspect of building the hotel is coming to fruition, which is other people are giving Des Moines a look that they otherwise just simply weren't doing previous.
The depth of the conversation back then too, Wayne, as I recall, and Angela will probably remember this, is that the area you're talking about that Polk County owns to the south of the arena, that parking lot area down there, that was originally identified as an entertainment district. And I think, Angela, you recall, Des Moines was involved in those discussions also. I think Court Ave had a little bit of heartburn over it.
Right.
But I just think that has so much potential there to the south of the arena for the future, for future boards or what have you to still consider, because I think it was really pretty good plan. And there's some big numbers that go along with it, but anyway.
Well, there was already talk too about, I think at the last CVB meeting I was at, they already want to, they'd like to add on to that Hilton because they need space. I mean, more conventions and shows and trade shows. It's not like they're losing money at the hotel. They need more space. Rooms.
Yeah. And again, there were different iterations of this, but at one level, it was suggested that the ideal size of the hotel would be about 457 keys.
Right.
When I say ideal size, where the administrative infrastructure and then the number of people. So for example, you have a pool, you're gonna have a pool at 300 rooms or 450 rooms. 450 was great. It was ultimately decided that the size of the hotel would be scaled back. So we're 313 or whatever the number of keys are. But that was something that was discussed at the time, which was an intentionality to build the property so that additional rooms could be added to it if things go well. And I would say, generally speaking, things have gone, at least from my perspective, have gone quite well from the intention of the hotel, with the obvious exception of, COVID hit America, and that has created very, very difficult times for travel, leisure, et cetera, and your property hasn't been immune to that. I can say that, again, through these meetings that we have, and we talk about marketing, et cetera, your property handled very well during the pandemic in comparison to other things. And in large part, that was due to our ability to maintain a level of rate which I would say would be, generally speaking, above market, because it's a great adjacent property right to the convention center. So when people are deciding not to come, they're deciding not to come to the other places. They haven't been saying, we're not gonna come to the Hilton.
We were very fortunate.
Warren is our consultant. They stay on top of the numbers, crunch them monthly. They compare it constantly to national, regional, and Des Moines, correct?
Yeah, and they are, and I would say that I think they're doing a very valuable service to the county, because they are constantly beating up Hilton. What's your budget? Are you going to make your budget? How do we revise the budget? We didn't have as much profit last month as we thought we were going to. How do we translate the changes in sales number to a much smaller deficit on the net operating profit number?
And they've consistently been able to maintain probably the highest average daily rate in Des Moines.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple, like the Deluxe is a good example of that's just a specialty property, and they command a premium. But when you compare it to the downtown Marriott, the West Des Moines Marriott, kind of similar properties, yes, we are consistently number one or number two in average daily rate.
Tim, back to your waterfall, under a qualified management agreement, how does Hilton get paid then for the services they're providing under our qualified management?
So they're above step one. So when they retain dollars to cover their operating costs, one of the operating costs is the Hilton management fee.
Yep, and what is that fee?
I can get that for you. I'm sorry, I don't remember offhand
Okay.
what it is.
But again, conceptually, I would say that my understanding is, and I'm not a hotel attorney either, okay? We have hotel attorney when we need it. Generally, when a Hilton would come in and run a flag, they would expect to get some portion of the profit of the hotel, if not just a direct ownership bit, okay? They're not able to do that under this IRS model. And so kind of the way they emulate that a bit is by having, if you will, the base management fee, which is what they get paid off the top. And then if the hotel is going gangbusters, they would get just a line item supplemental management fee, as Tim said, and they have not gotten that second bit since we opened. So they have been laboring under just the base management fee since the inception.
But the subordinate management fee, to meet that standard, to actually qualify for the subordinate management fee, what would they have to achieve?
They'd have to have produced at least $5 million a year of free cash flow that was transmitted to the trustee. Debt service have to be paid. FF&E dollars have to be set aside. Admin fee, of course. Once you get through those, whatever dollars are left from the $5 million drop into the subordinate management fee and can be paid. But the key is the way the agreement's written. If there's money in that fund, but they have not produced $5 million of revenue, they still can't get the money.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they get paid first. Under this waterfall agreement, they get their management fee. They do not have at-risk funds in this project.
Other than the subordinate fee, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
And you'll let me know what those,
I will. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't bring all those numbers. So, doing okay? So then my last little bit here is kind of what has cash produced been, and kind of what's my calculation of what the run rate would look like. So there has been cash paid, so they've covered operational costs, and obviously paid to the trustee, who's then used it to pay debt, et cetera. in those amounts as shown. Obviously, in 20 and 21 were difficult years during COVID. And virtually no cash paid in 2020. That 200,000 that was paid was actually in, I think it was paid in February, so it was revenues from January 20, and we kind of shut down in March. So the 21 revenues, I show it as 4.65 million paid. It's a little bit misleading because you have to kind of add across the contributions from other funds to see that, well, add up county's contribution from ARPA, dollars they received from PPP, other cash from Polk County, add those up. That's how the cash was paid. 2021 would not have produced any real cash otherwise. So, but by 22, back to producing cash. But you can see the 5 million threshold I mentioned for them to get paid their subordinate fee has never been met. And my estimate this year is they'll have a hard time, they have a long ways to go to get from April to December and raise that number up to 5 million such that they could earn their fee.
I'm sorry, and then just only add, I would do that too. One of the other things that being part of this process taught me a little bit is convention center hotels, because a lot of their business is events, it's a pretty long cycle for getting things on. They're taking room reservations now for 2027, 2028. So when you look at these numbers, 2018, that's the number that the hotel opened. 2019 is a decent number, knowing that they had none of that sort of 3-year window of things coming on, and so 2020 really should have been the year that the hotel started rocking and rolling, and then again COVID. So 18 and 19 and 20 would have been the ramp up years. And really, it wasn't until 2022 that I would say was kind of the first kind of adult year for the hotel.
So our calculation, just trying to give a picture as to what I call it the run rate. What would we need to generate year in and year out to kind of cover all the expenses? So 300,000 for operating, 3.7 million for debt service, and then the required FF&E set aside is about 700,000 a year. That totals 4.8 million, something like that. And those will grow as revenues of the hotel grow. So too would those line items. But you can kind of compare that to prior years and say, all right, in 22 and 23 we were pretty close. 24 little short. 25 appears to be a little bit short again. So Matt, back to your question, when we're a little short, what gets shorted is the FF&E contribution, because that's the first, after admin and debt, that's the next contribution, and if there's not enough money to flow in there, it doesn't flow into that account. Now, from there, I would calculate additional, which is when I talk to CHM about FF&E and kind of how do you really make sure a hotel is as nice 20 years from now as it is today, 4% of room revenues is not enough to set aside, and they would suggest that that number needs to be 9 or 10% of room revenues. And so I would come back and say, well, if I really wanted to have a run rate, I'd throw another $1 million a year into the FF&E beyond the 700,000 that we're contractually obligated by the Hilton agreement to do. And if we're going to get that far, we're certainly going to be paying Hilton their subordinate fee. So my simple calc on the real run rates, the revenues need to be slightly over 6 million each year, and we're short of that number
Could they do a surcharge on room nights, or increase one? I'm sure they got one now, but increase it any year, or is that gonna hurt their business?
So we've heard, to my knowledge, I haven't heard anything about the surcharge being an issue for
It's
anybody.
like they do put surcharge on tickets for Wells Fargo.
Yeah. So we do it, there is one today. It's a 3% of the room revenues. So, and I guess I haven't specifically asked Hilton, or, do you hear about this? But we're not hearing at the board level.
Is that an average rate, do you think, that you hear about? I mean, that would be normal, a normal rate, the surcharge,
So I pay a surcharge when I stay in other markets.
right?
And a lot of times I see them either as a fixed dollar amount or a percentage. And
Okay.
I'm not seeing numbers that are way different in
Right.
any other market than what we see here. So I think I have a couple of takeaways of data that you'd like. What questions can we answer? So the FF&E fund has a couple $1 million in it, and the remodel that Hilton is prescribing requires about $7 million. And they call it a soft remodel. You're not doing anything in the bathrooms. You're doing paint, carpet, soft coverings, et cetera, updating the front entry, the lounge, that sort of thing. And so the issue is, how do we fund the difference? It'll take the rest of this calendar year and into next for the kind of the design work. And then I think their plan would be to be doing room work in early part of 2026. Obviously, they'll have to coordinate with Hilton and with the partnership over usage and, when is the hotel needed for occupancy versus available. In theory, the available would be the very early part of the calendar year. But,
So you're looking for 5 million?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
How long is their agreement?
Great question. So the original agreement was 15 years.
Did we put in there at 5 or 7 years? Like, is there a time they recommend? Or is this it, and then it won't be again until the end of their agreement, when the student comes on? What is the standard for that? It just doesn't seem that old. I'm curious.
Understood. So, and we're outside of my area of expertise and into the CHMs a little bit, so I'll do my best. So the typical soft renovation is every 5 years, according from what I've heard CHM. Hilton delayed it for COVID, so tacked on 2 more years. But a soft renovation, again, is mostly about, not moving walls, not doing plumbing, et cetera. There's nothing specifically in the agreement other than the IEC will do what Hilton wants, or Hilton can eventually remove the flag. That's not something that's advisable, but from there, there's wiggle room on both the owner and the Hilton's part. I didn't really answer your question great, I realize.
I can maybe add two points to that, and again, Warnick would be great to talk about these things. Point number one, my understanding is this first, and I agree, and again, I'm just a lawyer, but it seems like you build a hotel 5 years, you already have to do stuff. Well, it's things like carpet, and so maybe that makes sense that, in a high traffic area, you would need to do that. So my understanding is this first soft renovation usually comes on in about year 5. And Hilton has already agreed to kick it out, as far as we are here, both because the hotel's new and COVID and all those sorts of things. So even though it does, it certainly seems to me that we just built the thing, but we're actually behind what we understand to be normal for that kind of first renovation. That's point number one. point number two, and this came out a little bit when we had a kind of a little pre-meeting that maybe there was a little misunderstanding, so I want to make sure we're clear on this. Polk County is now, has always been one of the largest bondholders, is now the largest bondholder. Polk County so far has made the decision that every time money came off of the hotel, that rather than Polk County taking that and redeploying it for Polk County purposes, they would put it back in order to pay off the bank, right? Because rather than Polk County effectively bear, 40 years from now bearing that interest charge, they'd rather get rid of them. So what has happened is Polk County has gotten payments that has funneled back into the hotel for Polk County's ultimate benefit. The timeline of this, even though we're not going to be able to cover it all from the FF&E fund, the timeline is the $5 million. We would expect what would happen is as money comes out to Polk County on those bond payments, rather than putting them back in to pay off the bank, they put it back in to cover this. So just to be clear, because I think there was maybe some may have been some confusion on this point. IEC is not coming to Polk County to say, please give us $5 million from other sources, okay? But before we commit to continuing to go down the process that we're contractually obligated to do with Hilton, we want to make sure we're all in alignment, and that Polk County would be willing to take, to redeploy those hotel distributions back into the hotel.
So did we underestimate the FFE fund originally, or was this redistribution at year 5 or 7 always anticipated?
Well, as Tim pointed out, because the hotel has so again, simple math, if it take $5 million a year, okay, from inception, would have filled up the FF&E fund. So there should be, as Tim said, a couple $1 million in there that isn't right now. Okay, so there's that point. But the second point is that there is an element of working with our flag and negotiating out exactly how much we do. So it's not like there's a requirement that we spend $5 million. It's, well, what does the hotel need? And as Tim indicates, Warnick tells us that really, even if we fully fund that contractual FF&E requirement over a long period of time, that's still probably light. So ideally, we'll be bringing in not $5 million a year, $6 million a year or more. That extra amount can be used to do the larger renovations as they come on.
When does the hard renovation happen? Like when you do the bathrooms, and then that's substantially higher, so you need to prepare for that.
Yeah, good question. It's probably 7 or 8 years out from now,
From when
yeah.
they did the soft.
Yeah. I think I said the wrong date, though. I wanted to correct. I'm not sure that they'll do much work in '26 until later in the year. I think I suggested they might be doing some work early in calendar '26, but the thinking is that with supply chain, it would be best to design, order the supplies, make sure they're on site in full, and then start doing install. And just to make sure that we don't have installers and they're ready to go and there's nothing to install. So I think there's some timing, there's more timing in that discussion than I originally remembered.
So you're not really asking us for $5 million. You're just telling us this is what we're doing. We have an agreement with Hilton. It's time to do our soft renovation. We're moving money around. We're gonna do the moving the debt. We're doing what we said we're gonna do. We don't have enough money in our capitals because we had COVID. We had a lot of things happen in 20 and 21, so we don't have the money in there. And you're making it happen, making magic happen with all your movement of your dollars. And we're gonna extend it a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, we're not here to tell you what we're going to do. IEC exists exclusively for the benefit of Polk County. The board members of IEC Hotel Corporation 5 of them serve at the pleasure of Polk County. We have since this idea started, had a very good, close relationship with Polk County, with the Polk County administrator, with the staff, and we really like the idea of doing what we've done in the past, which is just continuing to all be rowing in the same direction, okay? And so coming to you now with these expenditures that we're looking at doing at the end of 26, et cetera, is again to just make sure we're all in aligned, and particularly to say we would hope that as we need those funds, and funds are distributed from the hotel on the county's bond payments, that the county would be amenable to reinserting them back into hotel, not for bank debt service, but to cover whatever underage we have at that time.
And I think that's really the key. When we first structured this, the bank debt was purposely divided into two categories, Series A and Series A1 and A2, the 30 million and the 10 million. By retiring that $10 million essentially within 5 years, that significantly lowers the debt service. All of that money that 10 million that we paid off in 5 years, some of that, if not all of that money, can now be used to fully fund the FF&E or whatever we want to do.
So it's not new money?
It's not new money. You've retired $10 million
Right.
of debt in
Right.
5 years. And we structured it that way because thanks to people like Tim and all the countless lawyers that were involved in this, and the bond issuance, was they saw the difference between a $140 million bank debt and a $30 million bank debt. And by eliminating that 10, Tim can get you the numbers, how much and Deb might have a ballpark number of how much we've saved in debt service. Because was that a 30-year loan? Or 10?
Yeah, it was 30.
30. We paid it in 5. So that amount of money that we saved, 25 years of interest payments, is why we did it this way. That money is going to pay dividends now, where you're going to be able to fully fund FF&E, most likely. If we put it back in there, your choice.
So I want to make sure, from my perspective, the $27 million loan that the county owns, when you receive the payments, those are your dollars. You're free to do with them as you so choose. The board, this board, not the IEC board.
Which is what we used to pay the 10.
You've
off.
chosen to use them.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to pay it.
And all the IEC, I think, would like is that you choose to use the 25 and the 26 calendar year payments for the same purpose, to fund the soft renovation. So when you say we're not asking for any money, yes and no. Yes, we are actually asking for county dollars, but no, we're not asking you for dollars that you're not getting from the hotel.
You're
Does
making
that make
money
sense?
not on the bank loan, but on the $27 million bonds that we issued.
Yeah, so stated differently, another way to potentially look at it is, when this waterfall was originally created, it could have been created in different ways, okay? And one way it could have been created, which could have been logical, would have been that the first thing that gets paid is the bank debt, and then the second thing that gets paid is all the reserves are fully funded. And then the third thing that gets paid is Polk County, the ultimate owner, right? Your debt could have been subordinated to those other things. It was decided that that wouldn't be how it is, that Series A, the bank, and Series B, Polk County, would both get immediate payments every year, which would then allow Polk County the flexibility to decide, as you have and as you're deciding today, okay, we're getting money every year, what do we want to do with it, right? And again, so far, you've said, okay, let's put it back in to pay down bank debt, okay? And again, the FF&E fund was not required to be fully funded before Polk County gets paid. So now we have a situation where, we're in front of you and you have those decisions, how do you want to deploy the resources? So and from that standpoint, I think I always say my byword is flexibility. Anytime I can build in flexibility for my clients, et cetera, I'd like to do so. I didn't engineer this part, but I think that's really what's going on. I know it's complicated and required us to spend 30 minutes explaining to you before we even got to it, but that's really what it is. Polk County has some flexibility now under this structure as to how it deploys its capital.
So what are we doing?
I was just gonna add, so the two actions I think that Polk County would need to do would be one, definitely a resolution like she's done before, saying that, we're authorizing that money that's coming in to go towards FF&E. The language you used before is prepayment on the bonds, different language. So one, a resolution just authorizing that up to a certain amount of money under FF&E. And then two is, general services is supposed to be issuing an RFP for the construction manager at risk to do work. Is that correct?
Yes. And Deb, just ballpark, what were those, was it $500,000 every quarter, or?
It's, 500,000 interest payments and 2.5 debt service. 3 million a year.
That you were using to pay down the 10. Now you can put some of that in FF&E.
How much Polk County's getting from the hotel on Series B.
1.7
Tim says 1.7
a year, yeah.
per year.
1.7 per year.
Revenue from Series B,
Yeah.
so we're making $1.7 million a year on it.
So that would get us to our 4.08 estimated.
So is that the plan we're doing, or?
Yes, that would be the recommendation, instead of prepaying those Series B, is to use that money for the FF&E, and I think the key point for me is this is not general fund money. And that was,
Series B is the money we make. The other,
go prepay the loan.
no, what, Series A.
is the bank loan, so.
That's
so
what you
rather
repeat.
than prepay some of the Series A bank loan, those funds would be used to cover the FF&E shortfall for this all.
Series B is revenue, Series A is expense.
Deb, you understand we need to draft resolutions based on the discussion? All right.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Appreciate it.
All clear as mud.
Thank you.